Welcome to Speaking of Entrepreneurship, a podcast powered by the Center for Entrepreneurs at Cuyahoga Community College's Corporate College. Here, we dive into real conversations with industry experts, innovative founders, and business leaders who share their insights, challenges, and strategies for success. Whether you're launching a startup, scaling your business, or just exploring the entrepreneurial mindset, this is your space to learn, adapt, and thrive.
Welcome to Corporate Conversations. My name is Heather Holmes Dillard, principal at the Rabin Group. We are a national public affairs and strategic communications firm. And here with me today at Tri-C's Entrepreneurship Center is Vanessa Whiting, CEO of A.E.S. Management. Welcome, Vanessa.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Franchisee and owner of 15 Popeyes in Northeast Ohio.
That's right. That's correct.
Tell us, Vanessa, your journey to entrepreneurship. Was this always something in your blood?
Well, I'd say it was in my blood, but it was also in my late husband's blood. And when we were, he was finishing business school, I was a practicing attorney, and decided that he wanted to own his own business. But we were both in different places, and we moved to Cleveland, and that's when he'd already decided that he wanted to own his own business. And I was supportive, and we worked to make it happen. You know, he was 27 at the time.
What was the first business you guys or Tony owned?
Sure. The first business was Docs, and we were joint owners. I was the lawyer, so I laugh at it now. I set it up 51-49% ownership.
Oh, there you go.
There you go, because Mama didn't raise no foolish daughter, right? But that was a kind of a running joke that we had. But it was Docs Great Fish, and it's a franchise out of Chicago that had not been in Cleveland. And it was Black-owned. It was started by a young African-American man. And this was back in 1989.
I feel like I remember Doc's Fish.
Doc's was at Lee and Stockbridge.
Okay.
And we discovered, he knew about Doc's because he was from Chicago. And some friends of mine who knew we were looking for a business, who I graduated from law school with at U of I, and they lived in Chicago, and called and said, hey, Doc's is franchising. I know you guys are looking for an opportunity. Why don't you take a look at Doc's?
Because the 80s is really when franchise ownership became a thing. Like, it really kind of scaled.
Well, it started to scale. And this was, like I said, this was a new franchise. So it was entrepreneurial. That franchise itself was entrepreneurial. They gave you broad leeway to find your own sources. So his background in business and having consulted other businesses really helped him out. So it was a franchise, but it was more like a startup. To be honest.
Yeah.
And as we grew,
can you imagine being a startup early franchise owner of,
right.
McDonald's? Right.
That's right.
Got it.
It was a bit of the Wild Wild West, but we enjoyed it. I would. He worked the business full time. He operated the business, and I was still practicing law. So I would leave the law firm, come down to Lee and Stockbridge, and make fist sandwiches. Yeah.
And then I read, Vanessa, that while doing your law practice, you were doing legal work for Popeyes.
That's right.
And so is this how we made this transition from Doc's to Popeyes?
Exactly. One of my clients was a Popeyes franchisee, Van McCarley and Oscar Saffold. And Van actually said, hey, you guys ought to look at Popeyes. It's a great brand. It's a growing brand. It was founded in the 70s, but it was, to your point, was really starting to take off. But lots of opportunity. And that's a little unusual because you don't typically have a franchisee in a market inviting you into their market. He's a great guy. And as it turns out, there was method to his madness. We were his exit strategy. So he knew, he believed in us and knew Tony was a very talented operator and developer. And subsequently, we did buy probably 6 of his stores. Now,
I'm going to kind of go over the place because you mentioned exit strategy, and that's something that I think entrepreneurs don't really think about sometimes, right? I mean, there's this glitz and glam of owning your own business, but talk about the importance of really mapping out how you get in, what you're doing when you're in there, and how are we getting out? When's it time for the next thing?
Exactly. So with Van was probably 20 years our senior. So he calculated in his mind when he wanted to retire and, who would be a likely likely candidates to acquire his business. And we're, at that point now that I'm, doing a succession plan. I have 3 adult children. Taylor has worked for me for 7 years, and now she's doing her own company. She's launching her own non-alcoholic beverage company with adaptogens. I had to learn about what that meant. And so she's very excited about that, very excited for her. And I have another daughter who's an entrepreneur, but an artiste. She's an artist. And also teaches art and is going back to get her MFA. And I have and I'm not using their names because I don't know if I'm supposed to.
Okay, it's okay. Yeah, understood.
Okay. And my son is in the business now. So he is actually thinking about succession. So the whole family, we're talking about succession and whether we transfer to that generation, the second generation, or whether there's what that looks like.
So you talked about how your journey to Popeyes really was Tony's journey, right? To begin with, really and you kind of just fell into it or acquired it, right?
Or acquired it, or supported. I was the lawyer,
So we growing up though, like was that a shocking shift to go from corporate America 9 to 5 or 7 to 11, right, to entrepreneurship? What were you exposed to entrepreneurship growing up? Was this shocking, or was it really a very natural transition?
I wouldn't say that it was shocking, but as we were talking about before, my parents were educators and always said, find your passion. Very supportive. My father always had a side hustle. He was a teacher, but he was a draftsman, and he would draw houses, and architects would stamp his drawings. So he did a number of different things. Always had a full-time job, but did a number of different things. And as you may know, I started my own practice. So I also have that entrepreneurial bug. I was a partner at a major firm. I was an associate at firms, but for 10 years I had my own practice, and then went back into a firm, and then came back out. So I had 2 practices actually. So I think entrepreneurship was in our blood.
It was in your blood.
Both wanted to kind of control our own destiny in a different way. Right. So.
Yeah, and you can see that as you talked about with your kids. I mean, many people know that you and I know each other, because I had the privilege of growing up with entrepreneurs around me. So it seems very natural to me. But for those who may not have that experience, right, of parents or community around them having 2 or 3 little side things or owning their own business, what would be your recommendation for somebody kind of starting their journey in entrepreneurship?
Well, a lot of people talk about passion and finding that subject matter. That was not the case for us, to be honest. We wanted to own a business. So we looked at a number of different businesses. And I know there are people who are inventing something and they are promoting that thing. For us, it was ownership of the business. Of a franchise. It was of a franchise or a non-franchise. We went franchising because of the capital requirements were easier. I mean, we looked at manufacturing companies. This was 30 some years ago. You still need a lot of capital. We were young. We were Black.
So let's talk about that.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
So we were pragmatic. I like chicken. He likes chicken. We don't love chicken. We didn't go into the business because we love chicken, right? We went into the business.
What's not with that figure, ma'am? It does not look like you.
Thank you.
You're not eating a lot of your supply. It looks like
it's still delicious. Everything in moderation. But it was a business decision, and we wanted to own a business, a profitable business. Entry was easier. We could raise the capital needed to enter into, and that's why we started, frankly, with docks, because we could own 5 docks. We weren't going to own it. At 27, I don't think you could build it. We did, 5 McDonald's. We might have been able to scrape together a McDonald's. And in fact, there are at the time, and I have the pleasure of working with a young lady whose father is Caesar Burke, who was one of the first Black McDonald's franchisees,
up here,
and that was
Chagrin.
in Cleveland.
Yep.
And so I'm pleased and proud to say we work together. She's my director of ops.
So what is the process of sourcing capital? How does a young entrepreneur, whether it is I've invented something, whether it is I want to acquire something, what does that look? How does one go about sourcing capital?
Sure. And fortunately, I think now, fast forward to 2024, there are so many opportunities. There are venture funds that are targeting or focused on supporting Black and brown people and women. That was not so much the case, 30 years ago. But I'll tell you about that, because we did source equity. But initially, it was friends and family, savings, bank loans, the pretty traditional route. We were not from money, but, if we knew you,
right?
It was doing whatever you needed to do. And we had people who would support us.
So for entrepreneurs of today, right, because things do look a little different than they did in the 80s or 90s, what would you do differently if you were starting now? Now that you have lived through this, right, if you were to start over again and you had any advice to any new entrepreneur, how would you recommend them starting this journey of, creating this story, of going to shop it, sourcing capital? Where would you direct them?
I don't know that I would change much, because we did get there, in fairly short order. And what I mean by that, so we had very traditional sources in the beginning, and as I reflect on it, it was risky. We had a brand that not many people knew. We were young. We had not run a business, so I don't know that. I think, but we had a plan. We had a great plan, and after the first few years, we were able to source more capital. Once you sow success,
right,
money will come. So I would say, don't get discouraged with that first. The first deal is hard.
Yeah.
Right. The first deal is hard. So that's our journey. Today, I think there are more opportunities to go with acquisitions. You can acquire. We did it 1, 2, 5 stores at a time. Now, knowing what I know now, I would go right to acquisition. Get your team together.
I love to hear you say that.
Get your team together. There are people who will back you. Sometimes it's easier to buy 50 stores than start one, if you have the background in it.
Plan, team.
And you can supplement with an experienced operator. If you're not an experienced operator, you can pay for talent and have that plan. So moving forward, and what I'm, teaching my own adult children is acquire. You don't have to always start. Now, if you have a unique product, of course.
Right. I know, but if you're looking to get into entrepreneurship, you would recommend looking at acquisitions, which I love it, because I think that helps maintain legacy companies, right?
Yes.
That helps companies with their exit strategy. And as you say, if you're acquiring, you're acquiring the knowledge on how to operate, and
you're acquiring the team. If it's a well-operated company, and if not, you can always substitute in. That's a different story if you're buying something that'll work out. But yeah, I would strongly encourage our young entrepreneurs to look at acquisitions, and I know some who are. They worked for equity funds or they worked for banks, and they're coming together because they have the resources. If not personally, they know how to access those resources, and they know how to put together a team to acquire a substantial business.
So if I, again, am new to entrepreneurship or have aspirations to enter into space, the conversations of capital and acquisition can be very intimidating. And if I don't have that community around me, where does one go to find these people? Am I going to my banker?
You do. You network. You can talk to experienced entrepreneurs who have been through this, and we will help guide you. I have a number of, I guess, mentees. They would call me their mentor. We meet. We talk about sources of capital. I will introduce them. They're out there introducing themselves and their businesses to investors, angel investors. Those are people who will invest in you early stage. There are those out there, and then there's mid-level. There are a variety of people who will invest in.
Do you think Cleveland is unique, like a unique community that is welcoming to those kind of conversations? I mean, my experience is kind of partial, right? Because I'm born and bred and I bleed Cleveland. And my lived experience with the entrepreneurs in this community is that they are very willing to help.
Right.
Is this something you think?
I think there are people who are willing to help. There had been criticism, that we didn't have venture, or venture is difficult for, and it is. I mean, they want to see major growth. But I know that there's some mezzanine funds here. There's some private equity that is opening up. So the criticism, in the past has been that those sources aren't here, but they are. But I think you're talking about resources of people who can even help you navigate that. So we were the beneficiaries of an investment from a fund. It was not in Cleveland.
Okay.
It was out of Philadelphia. So that's another thing. Don't just think about Cleveland as the only source of capital. So, and that was through networking. And, we had a substantial, for us, investment. It was a $5 million investment. So that source was not in Cleveland.
That is not insignificant at all.
It was... And not many people know that because we don't talk about it a lot, but that did enable us to grow, exponentially.
And acquire,
those restaurants and grow with, and grow.
Significantly, yeah, and scale. In your, I'm not going to name the years, in your experience, what would you name to be some of the most impactful feedback that you've ever received?
Focus on your business, right?
Okay.
And that sounds simple, but you could start getting pulled. And actually, it's, when we were younger, we were laser focused. And then, as you start doing other things, your family and your boards and that sort of thing. But you really always need to focus on your business. I'm in a people business.
Mm-hmm.
And so know your people, get to know your people, and also continue to learn. I have mentors. I reach out. I have colleagues who I talk to on a regular basis about our business, reading, learning, listening to your advisors. Renee Richard is sitting over there. She's been on our board for, we won't say the years, but number. Since the beginning. She was one of our first board members. We were in practice together. She's a CPA. She has an MBA. So we were surrounded ourselves with a tribe who had knowledge,
very specific skill set,
and who
support,
could support and could advise us. And I continue to do that. I learn from boards I sit on. I hope it's reciprocal. I hope I contribute to them, but I also learn. So it's constantly learning, staying relevant in your industry, looking at the trends.
So I would almost name that, because I've heard this from somewhere else, that you have to spend as equal amount of time working on your business, as you said, as you do in it. Right.
And you hear people say, well, you're working too much in your business. You want to be strategic at a certain level. CEO, you're being strategic. You're looking at policy. You're looking at operations. But I still have a small business. Mm-hmm. When I'm not in it, I have to be in it, not consumed with it and getting into the minutia. But it's an operating business, and I kind of reject that. I know what they're saying, but depending upon your infrastructure, and we're still at the point where we're a fairly small business. Mm-hmm. You have to pay attention. Mm-hmm. You have a CFO, I have a controller, but we're talking all the time. I'm looking at schedules. I'm just, I'm controlling labor from where I can. Somebody else is doing it, but at least at our level, when you take your eye off the prize, things can go awry very quickly. COVID taught, it was not, it was tough. It was tough for a lot of us.
For all the reasons.
For all the reasons.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when I say family business,
Yeah.
there might have been a day that you stopped by and we were at the stores.
Yeah.
If not working at the stores, talking to our people, keeping them motivated. It was really tough. So,
So what's next for Vanessa and A.E.S.? What's your dream?
Well, we're going to continue to grow. My leadership team wants to continue to grow. I'm looking at doing some other things, frankly. I've always done some development, so we're looking at real estate development. My son is a developer, so I'm working with him. I've got another partner, a couple of partners, and we're looking at building, quite frankly, a home ownership program.
Okay.
Really, my other life was community development, economic development law, and kind of pivoting back to that somewhat. But I still have to keep my eyes on Popeyes. I need to be able to replicate so that I can, if I step out, I know that
the
will
machine
continue.
is working. Yeah.
So
yeah.
we're grooming and growing my leadership team. So if that's the exit for me, that's good. And if we decide that that's not the way, we'll look for a third party. But right now, that's my principal business. But we are starting to look at some other things, some development. I said a home ownership program. So I'd love to be able to help in the city of Cleveland to give people an opportunity to own their own homes.
That's very impressive and very important. Right. Thank you for all of that work. What is one final thought that you may have, one final piece of advice that you may have for an entrepreneur, no matter where they are on their journey?
No matter where you are, I'm a testament that you can do it. As I at this point reflect back on my career, it has not been a straight path, but it's been a wonderful path. There will be challenges in life, and you have to be resilient.
Yeah.
And be able to make that pivot, build your network, your business network, but also your support system. I would not be where I am without family and friends who have been, whether it's cheering me on, cheering when Tony was with us, cheering us on, cheering the kids on. At the end of the day, that's really what's important, right?
The balancing of family and work and ownership is a whole other conversation.
That's a whole other podcast.
Whole other episode. Right. That's awesome.
But that's I don't know if we're ever really in balance, right? But it's
one day at a time.
One day at a time, and it's been rewarding. And I'm just grateful and thankful and glad to be here with you.
How can folks follow your journey from here on out?
We talked about that. Visit Popeyes.
There you go. There you go.
There's one near you.
Thank you, Vanessa, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to today's podcast, brought to you by the Center for Entrepreneurs at Corporate College. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and share with fellow entrepreneurs. Tune back in to stay connected with us for more insights and resources to help you build, innovate, and thrive.